Alright, so today, because I'm going to train it after I'm done with this here conditioning session, we're going to get back to basics talking about back training. Now, it's pretty obvious, but the back isn't composed of just one muscle or muscle group. It's a whole bunch of them. To hit the back in its entirety, we can kind of separate it into three components, or rather three movement patterns. A hip hinge, a vertical pull, and a horizontal pull. There's other things you can do, like, rear delt specific stuff and lat prayers and things like that, but fundamentally, for most of you, that'll give you the general framework of a pretty solid back workout that you can then repeat over weeks and months and get a decent amount of size and or strength depending on your goals. So first up, I'm going to start with the horizontal pull, or your rowing movements. Now I want to talk about rowing movements first, because while something like a deadlift you can load up heavier, rows are going to be your heaviest, highest intensity, direct back stimulation. These can be in conjunction with a hip hinge like a bent over row or a pendlay row, or they can be independent like you see me doing here with the hammer strength, isometric or bilateral row. But essentially, rows give you the most bang for your buck because you involve the lats, the mid-back, the traps. You pretty much hit most of the back musculature in one movement, biasing a little bit more or less to specific areas depending on the slight adjustment in angle of pulling due to what's referred to as pennation of the muscles of the back. Pennation is a fancy way to refer to the architecture of the muscle, essentially how it's arrayed along your skeleton to give you more or less leverage along certain lines of force. Part of the reason why your back muscles are arranged left, right, up, down, and center is because your glenohumeral joint, your shoulder socket, is the most mobile joint in the body. And so to support that freedom of movement and to allow you to pull from a variety of different angles, you need to have a variety of different muscles arranged in a variety of different ways. But back to the workouts, your next biggest lever in back training is going to be your vertical pull, or your pull from the top down. The two most common examples of this would be your cable lat pull down, like you see me executing in the picture, or your chin-ups or pull-ups with your body weight or with additional weight attached. But there's a variety of other machines and implements that you can use to pull vertically as well. Now, the primary difference between vertical pulls and horizontal pulls is while vertical pulls also utilize a variety of different back muscles, they generally bias the lats more so than like the mid-back and definitely the lower back. And now's as good a time as any to get into the discussion about widths. This is going to depend a lot on your individual structure, things like the length of your humerus, your clavicle width, things like that. But generally speaking, a wider grip with vertical pulls is definitely going to engage a lot of lats, whereas a narrower grip, you're probably going to hit some of the upper inner back muscles like the lower traps, the rhomboids, rear delt. You pretty much hit the rear delts doing any kind of pulling, but a little bit more so with a narrower grip. Now with horizontal pulling, and again, this is generally speaking, but it depends on individual structure, I found that a narrower grip tends to get more of the lats with horizontal pulling, and a wider grip tends to direct the pulling kind of inward towards the spine, the lower traps, rhomboids, that kind of thing. And then of course there's the bias of bicep or not, which is generally dependent on whether you use a pronated overhand, supinated underhand, or neutral grip. A pronated or neutral grip will tend to bias more of the brachialis, or the muscle kind of underneath the bicep that pushes it up, as well as the brachioradialis, the forearm extensors, whereas a supinated grip will tend to target more bicep. What I generally recommend if you don't have any pre-existing injuries is, assuming you have multiple back exercises in your workout, like 3, you do 1 movement with each grip, or you use the grip that biases the musculature that you're really trying to train for your sport or for specific hypertrophy goals. And then of course there's the issue of injury. Like, I tore a bicep, so now I do mostly pronated work. Then last, hip hinging. Now, hip hinge work is primarily going to hit your posterior chain, and your lower back is a big component of your posterior chain, along with your glutes and hamstrings. Depending on your sport and your needs, you can go about this a bunch of different ways. Having been blown up and severely injured, my days of doing super heavy deadlifts are pretty much past me, so now I do a lot of strength endurance stuff for my lower back, like back extensions, as you see here, reverse hypers, things of that nature. But big hip hinges like deadlifts, RDLs, those are great too. And like I mentioned earlier, there are rows that also involve a hip hinge, like bent over rows and pendlay rows. I generally recommend putting the heavier hip hinges earlier in your program when you're the freshest. And that's pretty much it, folks. A good, solid, basic back program is going to have some kind of row, some kind of vertical pull, and some kind of hip hinge. But this is just a basic back training 101 video, folks. There's so much more that could go into this. There's clean and jerk and snatch. There's rear delt lifts. There's trap-specific things like shrugs and upright rows. And then we can get into straps, versa-grips, chalk, all that stuff. So again, just a brief overview, more to follow, but get in there and get pulling. Thanks for watching.